Hello everybody and welcome back to Kerbal Space Program, where we are currently in a position right now to do Apollo 9. Although our Saturn rocket is kind of janky, we do need to get ourselves something along the lines of, it was on large volume containment. Yeah, getting these Kerbal fuel tanks and the TD-37 decoupler. That's going to be pretty necessary. Very heavy rocketry to get access to like the Mammoth would be ideal, but this is a quad engine, right? So we would actually want to have this be maybe mildly different, unless there's an attachment point on the bottom. But we're probably not going to get that science until after we have our existing, until after we've landed on the moon once, right? Bare minimum. So we're going to need large volume containment and very heavy rocketry. That's going to be at least 800 science. And I would love to get some additional science components. Things like the seismic accelerometer is probably not all that useful, but the magnetometer would be. Things like that's definitely not all that useful. Precision engineering would give us access to the weather analyzer, also potentially not super useful. The experiment control station would be. There's just generally a bunch of stuff down here that would be good to have. But that's not where we're at right now. We don't have the ability to get those just yet. That's fine. We're going to open up our janky Saturn V. It's going to be less janky once we actually have this good to go. It's, turbo janky, though. If we had a 2.5 meter fairing, I would have the fairing be right here. And then the fairing would be just going straight up and would be a lot less janky. Also, I would like to replace these thuds with smaller engines. One thing I wanted to test, though, I thought of this while I was laying in bed last night. I was like, can this thing, and actually that's the old version of the LM, if we open this up and we reroute this, so we reroute this so that this is the root part, like so, and then we ditch everything up here temporarily. That's with the docking port being ditched. Okay, that's not necessarily what I wanted. I wanted to ditch this docking port. So if we ditch all of this, right? The question that I have is, without the thud, well, without the thuds, plural, can we lift this thing on just RCS? I doubt it, especially with the liquid fuel and oxidizer in here. Maybe on Minmus, but I highly doubt it on the moon. Wait a second. We don't have a decoupler on this? Okay, that would have been a problem. That's good to know. We're going to not save this. We're going to reopen Apollo 8. We definitely need a decoupler on there. Okay, so that is going to go, like, right here, right? We know that this is, like, a 1.875 meter, I believe. So we need a TD-18 stack decoupler would be fine. And flipping it around this way, I believe. Like that. Okay, now this thud is probably going to be way too much over the moon. I do want to do a quick test here. So we would be landing on this engine, and we'd be taking off with this. Yeah, I do want to have those be like twitches instead of thuds. The thuds are way too big. I don't think there's any way to reduce the size of them, unfortunately. So there are definitely jank things here. In the future, upgrades that we're going to make to this as we get the tech. We're going to have a thud. We're going to have twitches instead of thuds. Yes, that is definitely a thing that's going to happen. We're going to move this fairing down here, and it's going to just go straight up. This is going to be moved up to the 2.5 meter size, and then this is going to go up to the 3.75 meter size, with this then being 3.45? Whatever the Kerbal size is. It's going to be brought up to that, and this is going to be rejiggered into being a little bit better, is the idea. So we have a janky Saturn V here due to technology. But that's okay. Let's save this. Let's put this out on the pad. And let's give this a go. This is actually Apollo 9. This is called Apollo 8. But this is Apollo 9. I should have renamed it to Apollo 9 in the VAB. But it doesn't really matter. Okay, so let's put this out on the pad. And we're hoping that we don't have any breakage from the LAM. So that's definitely a concern. We're going to move this on up, and we are then going to double check our staging here. I don't know what these 2 decouplers are. Where are you? We've got one there and one there. Okay, those are definitely incorrect. So this decoupler, I think, is correct, and this engine should be moved down. This decoupler, not so much. Okay, yeah, that's our returning decoupler. That's our thuds. We're going to have to rework that a little bit. We can actually bring that back to the VAB. We know that we want to rename this to Apollo 9, right? So let's rework our staging here. Let's move this over to Apollo 9. We'll save this, and our staging, we know that this comes down. We know that this moves up for now. This is our re-entry here. So the LAM module, we're going to have something kind of like this. This stage goes away for the moment. That's our return. So as far as the crew return system goes, we're going to have our drogue chutes here, and we're going to have our main chutes. Those are all drogues there. We're going to have our main chutes here. Then, for the LAM, we're going to fire this engine here. The fairing can be moved out into its own stage. We're probably going to manually stage that. The thuds would be used for the ascent stage, although we definitely want to downgrade those. The stage 1 here over Moon is at what? 14.94 thrust to weight. Okay, yeah, we're going to downgrade this to like 10% thrust on these thuds. Well, actually 10% is maybe a little too much. We're going to downgrade these to like 20%. Yeah, that's a 3 thrust to weight. That should be more than enough. So that all looks good. We've got about only 177 dV in that. That might not be enough. We might have to rework this ascent stage. That said, we could land on this and then lift back off on this without leaving it in place. That's not historically how it worked. That would give us more DV. We could also have some fuel in like drop tanks on here. That's something we can work on. For the time being, let's put this thing out on the pad. Let's get Apollo 9 done. All we have to do is put these in low orbit. So that's reasonably acceptable. We can definitely do that. We're not going to get science out of this, which is a little sad. What do we actually need to get the Twitch engines? If we need additional fuel anyway, you know what? If we need I'm being very indecisive right now, but if we need additional fuel anyway on this liftoff here, then what we should probably do is rework this like so. We take this off, we take these off. They're too much anyway. And we would end up putting like another one of these guys on, except maybe it would be like a, say, 220. And then we would put on a small engine here. I mean, the Terrier is actually more efficient. So we would do something like this. What variant of that would we end up using? That would end up being perhaps even a compact? Sure. So it'd end up being something kind of like that, and we'd use that for our liftoff. So this is currently located, this stage is currently located here. We'll move that up over here for now. So in stage 0, over the moon, this is currently giving us nothing because this is decoupling first. Okay. 428 dV. So we probably do need to bring this up in its fuel amount. That said, we might not need to have this fully fueled. So it would end up being something kind of like this. 795 dV there. Yeah, that's probably doable. And then we would have a TD-18 decoupler here. And then this guy, we're having some issues here. We need to move this down a bit. There we go. This guy would go here, and we'd have to rebuild our fairing, right? I mean, the fairing needs work anyway. So that would just come up like so. and it would go to about here. And then we would bring that in and close that fairing. I can't really see what's going on up there, but that closed the fairing. Okay, cool. So it would end up being something kind of like that. We would probably end up wanting struts, and we would put those in here. It's kind of a tall lander at this point. I don't love it, but that's probably going to end up being necessary for the moment. And this fuel would be then we would enable crossfeed through this decoupler. So then this would drop down like that. We would drop these tanks later on. Actually, would we even need a decoupler here? I did not necessarily intend to grab that like that. Okay. Would we even need a decoupler here? Possibly no. Arguably no. That would save us a little bit of height, and I think that's good. Okay, so it would end up being something kind of like this for our Mooner module. I think that's reasonable. I do kind of want to change where this reaction wheel is, though, so I want to do this. I think that would look slightly better. It doesn't actually do much, but that would look slightly better. So obviously this fairing's a bit of an issue. I would also like to reinforce this for purposes of takeoff. So have it be something kind of like that to strut that together and solidify that. Those should automatically detach when we undock, in theory. So we'll test all of that in this orbital test flight. Okay, let's save this, put it out on the pad for realsies this time. We're going to launch this thing, and I hope our Delta V is okay. It should be. Well, our Delta V shouldn't be a problem. Our problem would end up being our thrust to weight. But it should be fine. It should be fine. So we're going to throttle up and SAS on. This thing is very tall, but I mean, it's a quote-unquote Saturn V. It needs more work, but we need tech for that. Double checking staging here. What is this decoupler? That's a guy all the way up there. Okay, I'm going to move that up here for now. Cool. So we're going to throttle up, SAS on, and off we go. Beautiful. So our thrust to weight is 1.65 off the pad. For the moment, that's fine. And how long of a burn time do we have here? Okay, about 100 seconds in total. That's not too bad. Beautiful. So that'll definitely get us a decent amount of altitude here. I'm going to get a small amount of horizontal speed going out over here. I'm not doing a full-on gravity turn. I'm still expecting that we're going to have some kind of low amounts of fuel. We're not drawing out of these tanks yet. Are we going to have fuel flow issues here? Hang on. I'm not sure if we will. But we very much might. Let's see if any of these engines flame out here. They don't. Okay, cool. No fuel flow issue. That's a good sign. We're going to continue to punch up through the atmosphere here with our very, very awkward rocket. It'll get better. We're going to continue to punch up through the atmosphere here, and we are going to get to about 40 kilometers apoapsis, and now we're going to steer on over, looking to get ourselves over to the horizon. We definitely pick up a bit of a roll as we turn, but that's super manageable. Excellent. Yeah, that felt very good, actually, heading over like that. I like it. It is trying to pull back up here, but as we get more horizontal speed and as air resistance drops, that shouldn't be a problem. So we're going to be ditching our first stage here fairly shortly. We've definitely got more power in that first stage. Quite a lot more power, which is good. And off we go with our second stage. Of course, for the purposes of efficiency, we've omitted the third stage. Since we would just be reusing the same engine, there's not really a point in having a third stage here. So we're just doing it like this instead. We've got lots of DV here. This engine, yeah, our staging up here is definitely a little broken. We can deploy our fairing, and I actually want to be looking in here. So 0.45, 0.46. Well, that does help the thrust to weight, but it's definitely not perfect. So these struts are going to be reasonably fine for the moment. Cool. One thing we could think about doing is having this be a little bit wider than our actual liftoff stage here. I find it a little strange that this doesn't include an ascent engine, but I guess whatever. I guess it does make some amount of sense. So we're going to proceed here. Inside of this service bay, we do have science equipment and lots of capacity for storage. We're probably not going to need that much capacity for storage, but we are going to be recovering it. So that is all absolutely fine. And we're just going to get ourselves into about a 100-kilometer orbit here. We're going for low Kerbal orbit for this particular test flight. This is like a shakedown run of this system here, is what the idea is. So that'll be fine. We're going to be ditching this stage eventually, probably after we get into orbit. So this is kind of our orbital stage here, and then this is what is intended to return us from the moon, right? So this is intended for getting into orbit. It's intended for transfer to the moon and entering orbit of the moon. This is intended exclusively for return from the moon. We land on this fuel. We ascend from the moon on this fuel. That's how this is working. So we've drifted off of the horizon a bit. Let's get that corrected. And we're just continuing to push up to about that 100-kilometer mark. We definitely have low thrust to weight here, but this is quite doable, actually. Now, our Saturn V is going to get further upgraded. We're going to hit a Block 3 Saturn V, probably after Apollo 11 is going to be the plan there. We're going to get a good amount of science from Apollo 10, but it's nowhere near the amount of science we're going to get from Apollo 11. At this point, I believe this system to be viable for a moon landing, although there's certainly additional upgrades to be done. I'm going to turn SAS off for a moment. Okay. No, we didn't get any trim there. It just feels like we've been drifting quite a bit, but I think that's just because we have low thrust to weight. So that's fine. We are drifting because we're changing our orbit, right? Or not changing our orbit. We are orbiting. So the direction that is prograde is constantly changing because of the force of gravity. But there we go. We are at 100-kilometer apoapsis. So at that apoapsis, we're going to circularize. This is not going to take much delta V at all at this point to get into a full orbit. So we'll do something along the lines of this. We've got a fair amount of debris out here. Okay. Noted. We'll have to clean that up at some point. And by that, I mean untrack it. Let's get rotated around. We're kind of slow on our rotations. No doubt about that. And we don't have any fuel cells. We might want to actually get some solar power on this. We've been operating purely on batteries and alternators for now. But we might want to consider getting some solar panels for the actual landing, just so that we have a source of power. In reality, they used fuel cells, but that is really far down the tech tree, and we're very unlikely to get that. So I think just a small solar panel, like on the ascent stage here, would be absolutely fine. So 40 seconds to go. 30, 20, 10, and 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, and mark. Excellent. So only about a 40 meter per second change here. There we go. This'll do. So we are now in a relatively circularized orbit. That's all great. And at this point, we need to do some work on the lunar module. So all of our I almost said units. All of our units of astronauts. Perfect. That's not dehumanizing at all. All of our units of astronauts are currently located here. We're going to transfer them, or at least we're going to transfer Jeb on over to the lunar module. So that works just fine. No problem there. We can, of course, also transfer Bill, which we'll do for right now. There we go. Bill has been moved on over as well. And then we're going to move Bill back. So we're going to transfer Bill over to here. So now only Jeb is in the Lunar Module. We need to do a couple of tests with the Lunar Module. And the real question is, how exactly are we going to handle this? The Lunar Module, of course, is not designed for re-entry or landing in an atmosphere. It's designed for powered landing. So, I want to run like an engine test and deorbit this separately, but we'd have to bring our Kerbal back here. So it'd have to be a pretty minor thing, right? Or we'd have to go get our Kerbal. One or the other. We're going to do an undock test at this point. Oh, one thing we should do first is we should jettison this fuel. So at this point, we no longer have that, and we're operating entirely on the crew module's fuel and the lunar module's fuel. So we're going to undock this. There we go. And we have no pilot aboard. And so we immediately enter this tumble, which is interesting. Why is it tumbling anyway? I mean, we can do this and get it under control. But it's okay. Weird. So that's going to be tumbling for a bit. We're going to go over here to retrograde. And we are going to decelerate this just enough so that it gets into the atmosphere. So we're going to activate this engine. Okay, never mind. I guess we're ditching that. That's a staging issue. And we're going to decelerate this a bit. We're going to have to come back over here, so I'm keeping that in sight. Okay. Cool. Jeb, I need you to EVA, bud. Let go. And we're heading back over this way. Cool. This is very awkward. This is a very strange way to do this. It's still getting further away right now, so we need to continue to accelerate. Now it's getting closer. Cool. So Jeb is on his way back here. We're going to have to make a few trajectory adjustments, of course. And it appears that that stopped its tumble, which is remarkable. Jeb is our pilot, so that does mean we should bring, I think, an autopilot module on this, because I do want to have an engineer just in case. So this will eventually deorbit itself. And yeah, now this is tumbling again. So Jeb is going to have to handle that tumble, right? So in we come. We're going to brake here. And Jeb is going to try to not get taken out by this tumble. Let's do that just to kill the tumble. There we go. Perfect. Hop on, Jeb. Okay. Now it's under control. Good job, Jeb. Now it's time to bring this on home. So we're going to bring this down, and this one I am going to bring down to 10 kilometers. This is a low Kerbal orbit, so we're not going to have a huge amount of speed, and we're going to have a more effective heat shield than our last heat shield as well. So that'll be absolutely fine. We're going to bring this on down. There we go. And we're going to ditch all of this fuel. So there's definitely a staging issue. I do think that we should include an autopilot module of some sort on here so that we can have an engineer remain in this and actually hold attitude rather than just tumbling all over. So that'll be fine. And eventually our lunar module will deorbit. But let's bring this on down. Cool. So we're going to physics warp forward, and we should have absolutely no problem bringing this on down. This should be a far, far better re-entry than our last. So onward we go. We're able to hold retrograde just fine here. Periapsis height is going negative as of now. And we are beginning to decelerate. Perfect. I'm still not super happy with this fairing, of course. That's going to require work. We know that we have a fair number of things in the Apollo program that we definitely want to alter, but as we get science from the moon, that's going to get a lot easier to do. The moon, like the Apollo program, is where we're going to get the bulk of our science for this. So that's absolutely okay. We're down to 1.7 kilometers per second. We are drifting a little bit off of retrograde while in physics warp. That's noted. 1.2 kilometers per second. And it looks like we are going to get a splashdown here, which is nice. 1 kilometer per second. Drogue chutes will be available shortly. 900. Yeah, this is a very controlled re-entry. Drogue chutes are indeed available. We'll go back onto physics warp and we can turn our SAS off. Okay, I just realized we don't have batteries in the lunar module, do we? Or if we do, we don't have many of them. We need to double check that. We definitely need to be concerned about power and staging in the lunar module. The staging is clearly a little bit messed up. We'll definitely get that done before Apollo 10 or during Apollo 10. So no issues there. We know that we need a couple of alterations to the command module as well. So good thing we did the Apollo 9 test, that's for sure. This is going to be a successful landing, obviously, so we're just going to grab the payment here. There we go. And while we're drifting down, let me mark it off on the list. So that is, of course, Apollo 9 done. Fantastic. So Apollo 10 is the dress rehearsal for moon landing. We're going to fly the lunar module down to 15 kilometers and then abort the landing. So that's going to be the plan for that one. We'll get a lot of low science, and we'll do probably an orbit or two and gather up what low science we can. So that'll be absolutely great. That'll get us a good boon of science, and maybe we'll grab the magnetometer from that. I want to check a couple of things before we go here, specifically. I want to add on a probodobodyne hex onto the command module. So as soon as we are loaded in here, we'll do that. There we go. Cool. So we're going to hop into the VAB. I want to add a probodobodyne onto the command module. I want to check the status of the LAM's power situation. So on the command module here, we're going to detach from here. We're going to add in a pod. This is going to be a probodobodyne. I'm actually going to go for the octo here rather than... We don't actually have access to the hex. I was going to say the hex, but we'll add an octo onto there like that. Adds a little bit of height to it, but we've got room in the fairing. Oh, the fairing is definitely a little wacky, but that's okay. I'm not too concerned about that. Now, the landing module actually does not have much for batteries at all. We should definitely include some. So we're going to put on a couple of strap-on batteries. I'm going to do 4 like this, and then for power, I'm going to, for the time being, and this is kind of anachronistic, but for the time being, I'm going to add solar panels here, and I'm going to add solar panels, I think, somewhere around... Where do we want these to actually go? That's an interesting question. Maybe like here? I guess? Something along the lines of that. So now we have a source of power. In reality, again, they used fuel cells, but this would definitely do. That will stop the tumbling situation, and then as far as the staging up here goes, there's definitely some broken staging, so that would end up being something like this. This decoupler is there. Okay, so that's for re-entry. Then we would want to have these guys be here. We would fire up, this engine, then this engine. But that engine would fire when this decoupler does, which is, awkwardly enough, down here right now. So that would end up being here. Yes. Okay. This should be correct staging. So I'm going to mark this as Apollo 10. We're going to save that, and we're ready to launch this out and dress rehearsal our landing on the moon. We're going to do a Block 3 upgrade of the Saturn V soon enough, and maybe do a little bit of reworking on the LAM as we move forward and start getting into like the rover missions. We'll see. You can leave your offerings to the engagement gods in the form of likes, comments, subscribes, and bell ringings, and a very special thank you to all of the channel members for making this video possible, including ALS Gamer, Shadow Wolf, Andy McGar, Spartan News, Nick Smarty, Dimitri H, Punching the Microphone, Soccerman12 UK, Kentogan, and all the rest. And of course, you. Thank you for watching. If you'd like to support the channel, you can click the join button down below the video, and as always, I will see you all next time.